Welcome to the Fit for Purpose podcast, where we explore how fitness and health can equip you to live a life of purpose. On this specific episode, we talk about programming. Listen, strength training can be complex. There's a lot of different voices telling you what you should be doing in the gym. So in this specific episode, we dive into what is the meat and potatoes of exercise, what movements should you be prioritizing so that you can get the most benefit out of your strength training. Many of these people are not, they don't have like grand aesthetic goals.
Yeah.
It's more about how can we get them to move well and feel good.
The reason we have technique is because when you do the technique correctly, it distributes the load across the joints. It distributes the load and the pressure across the tissues. When you do a movement poorly, then it puts too much load in one specific area.
I think more and more people need to understand the concept of strength training and exercise is all about practice.
So we were going to chat about an optimal program, or what's included in a high quality exercise program, and just kind of bounce some ideas off of each other about what we think is important for programming. And I think you can approach this from the perspective of a lot of different clients or people.
Sure.
Athletes train hard and specific for their sports, specific movements. But we both train
general
population. Yep. So I was thinking we could start there, and that would probably even be the bulk of the conversation, is like, totally. What does the average gym goer, general population person, what do they need? What do they need to be looking for in their program?
Yeah, I always start with like the foundation, because I think it can get really complex, because you can be like, oh, I want to add that too. Oh, I want to add that too. But at the very base of like, I'll just start with like my programming, like when I'm building stuff, it's your squat pattern. So I always explain that as bend of the knee, thinking kind of joint by joint, your hinge pattern. If you don't know what that is, bend of the waist, a push or pull, push and pull. And you can do that in a vertical or horizontal way. So if it's a pull, that's a pull up. If it's a horizontal row, that's a, bent over row or something like that. Push, you're using your chest or your shoulders. And then I really like to incorporate carries a lot. So figuring out ways to, if that's suitcase carries or farmer carries or something that's a heavy weighted carry. And then I think from there it has like some branches, but kind of like wait to dig into that a little bit more. But that for me is like my core.
That's the trunk of the tree.
That's the trunk of the tree. And I like to just, you can interchange that, which we'll talk about like in so many different ways, because you can get into like bilateral, or, if that's both arms or both legs working at the same time, unilateral, where you're doing, if it's a split squat or a single arm press, and different ways that you can create like different motor skills and utilizing your body in unique ways to provide greater challenges. But
yeah. So I mean, I'm in agreement there. I think the first place I heard that idea of have you read anything from Dan John?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I used to listen to his podcast a good bit too. Yep.
Yeah. So Dan John, Fundamental 5.
Yep.
That's where I first heard that kind of idea of breaking the movement patterns up into those 5 areas: push, pull, hinge, squat, and carry. And then he also says like there's like a 6th category, which he calls everything else. But yeah, like you were just saying, core work, floor work, just other,
Yeah, and like in my program, I like to incorporate. I call it like grunt work, because I think like like your sleds or like your sandbags or your swings and stuff like that get kind of crazy. Your assault bikes or your rows, like where you're incorporating some endurance stuff. Love to have that aspect. And then I also have found like it fun from a programming standpoint to incorporate a lot of like power development stuff. Like how can we take like what athletics does really, really well? Like you see these guys, programming for collegiate football players, you say, for example, and how can I like take that and provide it in a way that appeals to like your general population type person. So if it's a clean, maybe it's not a barbell clean, but maybe that's a snatch overhead with a dumbbell or something that's more doable.
Yeah. Still requires explosive movement.
But yeah, that's where you can kind of take some of these different elements to put into the pot and mix it all together.
Yeah.
And it becomes fun to kind of make a little puzzle piece out of it. So.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, so right there off the bat, we got our foundation of the program, which is you got to push, you got to pull, you got to hinge,
yes,
you got to squat, and you got to carry.
Yep.
Right. So those fundamental patterns need to be in your program. When there's a variety of different movements you can use to hit each of those patterns, but each of those patterns should be represented evenly throughout your program.
Yes.
So if you're looking across your week or across your month or whatever your period is, volume within each of those patterns should be about the same.
Yeah.
And we calculate volume by weight times reps times total reps or reps and sets, right? So how many times did you lift 100 pounds in the hinge pattern versus how many times did you lift X amount of pounds in the push pattern? Relatively, obviously your deadlift is going to be heavier than your chest press.
Sure.
But relatively, we should be looking at, pretty equal representation of
distribution
volume,
of
through those patterns.
Yeah.
So if you're squatting one day, hinging one day, and pulling one day, and then you repeat those before you do a push movement, you're out of balance.
Totally.
Right? So eventually, long term, that would lead to some sort of shoulder dysfunction.
Yes.
Right? Or postural dysfunction, because not each muscle and pattern and joint is being used evenly throughout the week.
Yeah,
and
it's
being
almost
developed.
like a game of tug of war. I guess I'm picturing an analogy of if you're pulling all in this one direction, you're going to get bundled up over here.
Yep.
And you're going to get pulled in on that weak point, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's total bro science theory.
Yes.
But it's also accurate in that
Totally.
you facilitate a muscle group and it stays facilitated. Like the neural drive, the connection from your brain, your nervous system into that muscle is stronger. So it's going to stay stronger and more activated. And then also as a muscle gets stronger and bigger, it has a higher resting tone. So you will literally kind of get stuck if you don't balance out the shoulder. So
this is stuff, you've been programming so much longer than I have, and that's stuff that is so unique to me that I'm still learning about. So, and mine is the way I program is full body kind of each and every day. Mm-hmm. So I guess the simplest way that I try to break that down or have tried to incorporate that is just making sure that every day incorporates those fundamental elements. And I typically program 4 days a week. So if I'm doing 4 days a week, every single one of those has one of those.
Or every single day has all of them.
Yeah.
Okay, so each day has
correct
all of them.
Every day is going to have a posterior chain, anterior chain for your lower body.
Yeah.
It's going to have some sort of push and or pull.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kind of just mix up if that's, unilateral, bilateral, you name it.
Yeah.
So
makes sense.
That way it kind of, when you look at the spread of the week and your volume, it balances out.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's relative.
Yeah. So I love the Fundamental 5 and I use it. And I also like Paul Chek's representation of this. He has 7 movement patterns in his system, and he breaks up squat and lunge.
Okay.
So, which, I would call, I could categorize a lunge into a squat pattern.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like a unilateral squat pattern. But he breaks up lunge and squat, and then he also has twist. And then he has what he calls gait.
Okay.
But gait encompasses loaded carries, sled, sprints, walking, running, It's gait.
Yeah, it's kind of a easier way for him, I'm sure, to create branches or funnels for things to fall into place through. Yeah.
And in my
there really is, even from a lunge standpoint, there's so many different ways to lunge.
Exactly. Lateral, dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
In my system, I also kind of use carry. I also classify carry as loaded carry, sled, sprinting.
Okay.
Anything that's anything that's in that gait pattern that's loaded or you're training gait, I classify that as carry or gait. I kind of use those interchangeably.
Sure.
So, for athletes or bodybuilders, they're going to be training differently. But as a general population person who's trying to get the most out of the gym in 3 or 4 sessions a week, and their number one focus is for the gym to benefit the way they feel and the way they live their life, balancing and working on the coordination and ability to execute all of these patterns effectively and efficiently is going to have like the best overall effect.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because these are patterns of movement that, you know, while you're not in this perfect form while you're doing it in day to day, they are things that you are doing it in your every single day life. Like I always think about it. I had this one lady that used to train with me at the group fitness gym I was at, and older lady, she would always joke about like, the only reason I need to train my upper body is when I go to reach for that cereal box or whatever in the morning. And I was like, that's a good way to think about it. Like if I need to have the mobility to get overhead, grab up, you know, reach for the counter. I need to have the ability to get out of a chair. I need to have the ability to pick something up off the ground.
Yep.
Need to have the strength to prevent myself from even falling in later years and things like that. Get upstairs. Like that's a unilateral leg movement. Like very, you know, people want to knock the idea of like functional strength training, but that's it. I mean, you're taking everyday basic functions and figuring out how to like get stronger at them.
Yeah. And I will say, I'm sure you're in the same boat. You can do a squat pattern movement on a leg press.
Mm-hmm.
You could do a push pattern on like, you know, like a hammer strength chest machine.
Sure.
But those things aren't going to teach your nervous system how to manage your body in space when you're going throughout your daily life.
Yeah.
So that there's nothing wrong with those movements, and they can be great additions to a good program. But the bulk of your training should not be on machines, because it's going to down-regulate your nervous system and your nervous system's ability to coordinate movements through each joint at the same time.
Yes.
To, you know, navigate your body, again, your body in space with gravity and objects around you. Your ability to navigate that effectively is going to be diminished by being on a machine.
Yeah, I fully agree. Yeah, it's really great for aesthetics. And, you know, if you're someone who is specifically training for like hypertrophy and a chiseled look, machines are awesome.
It can be a lot of stimulus.
Yeah. And like I'll go to the gym every now and then. Like I normally am training in my garage with mostly free weights, but when I do go to the gym, I mean, I'm hopping on some of those machines because it's a different stimulus than I can get at home.
Yes.
But that's purely because I'm like, okay, I want to really work this specific section, or I want to really break down these muscle fibers. It's not, if I had a choice, if it was like Desert Island, like you can do a push movement, but you can only do this, what would it be?
Yeah.
It's like you said, it's going to be something that's in space. It's going to be something where it requires a lot of stimulus from my entire body.
Yes.
Not just like locking myself down in a very isolated position.
You have to coordinate your entire body to do a push-up effectively, whereas like, you know, a hammer strength chest press, you literally just have to, you just got to push, because the machine's going to do the path for you. It's going to stabilize your whole body for you.
Sure.
So yeah, absolutely. And those are, again, like we're training multiple days a week, right? And that can be, a machine can be an effective way to get a lot of stimulus with a lower fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
So it's less fatiguing on your nervous system, because again, your nervous system's not having to do as much.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you think there's something to be said about like, because at the end of the day, it does build strength.
Yeah.
Do you think it translates in some way still, just not as effectively as what you would say? Or
yeah, I would say it builds strength in the tissues, right?
Yep.
And there will be carryover to like a dumbbell chest press if you do a hammer strength press, right?
Yep.
But you're going to be the coordination, the nervous system coordination is still going to need some time to come online for you to really see a big gain in your strength on a dumbbell chest press. Does that make sense? Like you need both. And you know, if I were to ask you or tell you, hey, Brandon, you can only work out 3 days a week for an hour, you wouldn't be at EOS doing chest flies.
No.
It wouldn't be a priority.
No.
But if you're working out 5 days a week because you have a home gym and like you enjoy lifting, and like, you know, on the weekend you might want to go get a chest pump, you're going to go do some chest flies. But it's not it's not the meat and potatoes of a quality program for someone who's in the general population.
3 chest movements that you have to pick from. you pose the question, so now I want to know what your favorite ones are.
3 chest movements?
The only ones that you'd get to select.
Chest specific or push specific?
Push specific, sorry.
Okay, so only 3 push patterns?
3 push patterns.
Dips?
Ooh. I didn't see that one coming, but I like it. I love doing dips.
Dips. Bottoms up kettlebell overhead press.
Okay.
And a low incline dumbbell chest press.
Low incline. Yeah, okay. Because it's kind of like you're getting a little bit of shoulder aspect of that.
Yeah, I mean, dips, you're getting like a downward pressing movement.
Mm-hmm.
A low incline, you're getting pretty much a horizontal, maybe a little bit more than a horizontal. And then bottoms up kettlebell, you're getting overhead, but then you're also getting the stability aspect as well.
That was a great answer.
Thank you. For sure.
I'm picking bench press. No, I'm just kidding.
Bench, barbell bench, barbell bench. And you're like barbell bench, barbell incline bench.
Single arm overhead.
Yep.
I would pick.
Yep. Bottoms up.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm a bench press guy. I mean, it's my strong suit. So I'm
you are strong on the bench press.
for sure. And then, gosh, the dips is money. I would say like a push-up variation.
Yeah, push-up. That's great.
But, bench press, push-up, you're kind of working that same horizontal push. But
yeah. Nice. Yeah, so, I mean, again, so, you're looking at a quality program. We've got our movement patterns, our fundamental movement patterns that we need to be hitting, right? And then I wanted to touch on the difference between pattern specific training and tissue specific training. And this is like, this has been a thought bubble of mine for a couple of years now, like something I've been playing with and kind of honing in on the idea of it and almost kind of combining these 2 styles of training.
Okay.
Because for when you look at some of the people in the fitness space that have become more well-known, they tend to either fall into one of these 2 camps, kind of.
Gotcha.
So if you look at Dan John, he's huge on the fundamental 5
patterns
and hitting the patterns.
Yeah.
Right. Same thing for Paul Chek, 7 movement patterns, and again, the movements are mostly focusing on executing the patterns efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
If you also look at someone like Pavel Tsatsouline, who is the guy who's mostly responsible for popularizing the kettlebell in the United States. He was a Russian kettlebell guy, strength coach. His training modality or his company is called Strong First, and huge on kettlebell technique. He talks a lot about greasing the groove and strength being a skill more than it is, having big muscles.
Yeah.
So when you look at strength being a skill, you're talking about perfect execution of the patterns so that the nervous system is the most as efficient as possible at executing the pattern with no other movement involved, so that the muscles don't have to work as hard to execute the same movement, right? So again, that's very like nervous system, neural drive, pattern specific, like dialing in those patterns, greasing the groove. And he'll talk about doing a set of 5 and then resting 5 minutes.
Wow.
Then doing a set of 5 and then resting 5 minutes. If you take a weight that you could do for 10, do 5, rest. Do 5, rest. And he talks about doing that over and over.
Just to get the repetition.
Greasing the groove.
Yep.
And you slowly build up strength that way. Right. So he was huge. He was a lot more popular maybe 10, 20 years ago, but he brought the kettlebell to the United States. Do you know who David Weck is?
I've heard the name.
So David Weck is kind of this like kooky inventor dude. He created the Bosu ball, like the half Bosu.
Yeah.
The half Bosu, the dome.
Is this the guy,
he does ropes.
the motion guy?
Yeah, he's all about like the spinal engine and rotating.
Yeah.
You got to rotate to go straight.
Yeah.
Everything relates to gait. He talks about those things. He's kind of a wacky character. But he's very cool,
he's
very
the dude
smart
that just
guy.
had a hip replacement, and is that the guy? And he's
I don't know.
the motion guy. He's always doing this with his hands. don't
He's
know.
got the long hair and the glasses.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
David Weck. So he created the half Bosu, and he got a lot of shit for that. But people were using it wrong. People flipped it over and were standing on the flat part and like trying to do strength exercises. He never promoted that. He used that for like training ankles and like creating compression on the ball.
Gotcha.
But he's huge into patterns too. Figure 8 patterns, spiral patterns through the rib cage.
Interesting.
And everything that he does exercise wise, again, comes back to gait and locomotion, because that's, human beings that's our absolute 100% most common movement or pattern that we're doing is gait, right? We learn that from a very young age. So these people are all talking about patterns, right? Now, we talked about knees over toes guy a little bit.
Yeah.
He's all about tissues.
Yeah.
Right? So he doesn't train patterns necessarily. He still does. If you watch his movements, he still does train the patterns that we're talking about, but his approach is joint by joint. And he trains the front of each joint and the back of each joint. So he'll start at the ankle, he'll do tib raises, and he'll do calf raises. So front of the joint, back of the joint. Then he'll go to the knee, he'll do leg extensions, he'll do leg curls or Nordics. Front of the knee, back of the knee. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
Same thing with the hip. He'll do like hip flexor raises or core movement, and then he'll do hip extension, like an RDL or back extension. So front of the hip, back of the hip. Spine, same thing. So he goes through all of the joints, and he trains front and back of each joint through a full range of motion with the intention of strengthening the joint itself. So he's more focused on like bulletproofing the tissues than he is about specifically dialing in a pattern. See what I'm saying?
Yep.
Same thing with functional range conditioning. I don't know if you've heard of them. They do, I'm sure you've heard of like the joint cars that people do.
Yeah, like a shoulder car, hip car.
A shoulder car or a hip car. So that concept of the car controlled articular rotation comes from the functional range conditioning. I guess their training modality. They do a certification. They do multiple certifications. Functional range seminars, I believe it is like the wide company, and then functional range conditioning is one of their certifications. But all the cars are joint specific.
Yeah.
So everything is focused in on training the joint for more range of motion and more control. And then they say that will translate over to everything else. It'll make all of your patterns more effective because the joint itself is working better.
Yeah.
Right? So you have people in different camps talking about patterns, talking about tissue specific. They're not really talking about tissue specific, but that's what they're doing. And when I'm looking at programming for a general population person, I like to include both of those things as much as possible. And so that's something I'm looking out for. Again, the patterns, in my opinion, are the meat and potatoes. But then I also like to throw in a lot of tissue specific work to help bulletproof people. Yeah,
because a lot of what we're dealing with on a daily basis is people who are a little bit deconditioned potentially. Many people have aches and pains. We're doing a lot of like almost like preventative care, or we're kind of doing like corrective exercise care. So yeah, if you can hit both things effectively, like for the general population, that's money.
Yep. And where this typically comes into play in my programming for general population is in the accessory work.
Okay.
So you could do a workout that has a squat pattern. So let's just say like a goblet squat to roughly 90 degrees and a pull-up.
Nice.
Excuse me.
Push-pull.
So we've got squat, we got lower body push, right? And we got pull. And then a kettlebell swing and a push-up, right? You got your hinge, you got your push, and then we can do sled or carry. And then instead of having them do...
like buys, tries, shoulders or something.
Yeah, we could do buys and tries, but what I'll have them do is like a lighter full range of motion preacher curl or something that's like...
or like you could do like a bottoms up kettlebell curl or...
Yeah. Something that's like, you don't want to, you're not going to as much want to do like a short range
Yeah.
Hammer curl, you're going to want to get like a full extension through the elbow and do it a little bit lighter.
Mm-hmm.
So that you're not only doing biceps, but you're also training these tendons in the elbow.
Yeah.
Same thing with your tricep movement. You could go, instead of doing like a skull crusher where you come behind your head, you could just like fold that elbow in half and bring that weight closer
like
to your
dumbbell
face.
to the shoulder here.
Yeah, and it's a lot more pressure on the elbow.
Or even like rotate through that push.
Exactly. Yeah. So then we're doing bis and tris kind of, but we're doing things that are a little bit more specific for the joint itself.
Sure.
You know, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, because many of these people are not, you know, they don't have like grand aesthetic goals.
Yeah.
It's more about how can we get them to move well and feel good.
Yes.
When they leave. So yeah, it's like you're still utilizing the bulk of the workout, which is gonna like create the greatest stimulus. You want to save that for obviously like the top portion of the workout where the body's fresh and can attack it. And then it's these things at the end are more, okay, how can we provide one value? As the coach, you're being able to provide value through all of these different specific things, and they're going to feel good, they're going to move well, and they're going to want to come back.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. And yeah, same thing for like, I'll do like band assisted full range of motion squats where you're just like getting as much compression in the knee as possible.
Nice.
Right. Throwing in hanging, throwing in Jefferson curls. It's like a really shitty technique deadlift where you're rounding your spine as much as you can, but you go super, super light so that you're training your spine.
Which that's specifically like something like that. Like, I mean, you know me, like I had a disc injury that lasted probably about a year of like fully getting to this day I'll have issues with it, but that was something that I, from a PT end and all the stuff I was doing to get right, was like, don't ever do that. You have flexion intolerance. Don't bend at the spine like that because you're going to make your disc worse. So I saw Jefferson curls and I was like, hell no. And avoided them for so long. But another PT friend of mine explained like, you do have to train both ends of the spectrum so that you're not so rigid to the point where what happens when you do a deadlift and you get that little bit of like shift out of normalcy, if you aren't training that, I guess your bookends, if you will, like that's when you kind of go down Schitt's Creek because you're not able to like, your body's not able to like prevent you back into, regularity, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
You have no threshold of like failing.
Yeah. If you don't train it, you're not going to have the ability.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's like saying, if you expand out the idea of like, don't flex your spine because it could make your injury worse. It's like, well, if I just sit in this chair and never move ever again, then I won't get injured.
And I will say something like that, not to get too specific on like the Jefferson curl, but for something like that, like if you were someone who was experiencing pain and you have that stiffness and tightness and because this is what people will do, like, oh, my back's tight and I'll just bend over the spine and try and find relief. What I would encourage that person is don't do that. I guess that's always my advice is because you're looking for relief and you're looking for relief by doing something that's going to create more shear force, that's going to aggravate that disc a little bit more. And then you're going to be in a rough spot. But if you're someone who's gotten you don't have that, you're looking to create like a preventative regimen, or maybe you had an injury and now you feel good and you're looking again to like beef up or bulletproof, like you said, that specific area. I think that's a great movement. Yeah,
absolutely. My perspective is, and again, there's a caveat in that if you have an injury or you're having pain somewhere, this can be different.
Yeah.
My perspective is that there's no movement that the body is capable of that is like wrong or inherently bad for the body. It's like it comes down to a lack of awareness or a lack of control.
Yes.
Or a lack of capacity. An injury only occurs when the force put into the tissue is greater than what the tissue can handle. Then an injury occurs. So we can lower forces into the tissue, or we can increase the tissue's tolerance to meet the force demand.
Sure.
Or we can do both, right? So if you're using, do both. If you're using really good technique and your patterns are solid, The reason we have technique is because when you do the technique correctly, it distributes the load across the joints. It distributes the load and the pressure across the tissues. When you do a movement poorly, then it puts too much load in one specific area of the body.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Like a deadlift, for example, if you do a deadlift poorly, puts all the tension into your lower back instead of sharing it with your hamstrings, your glutes, and your core.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I've heard it explain like your body is really good at finding the path of least resistance. So if there's a weak link in the chain, that's the spot that's going to break, because that's going to experience, you think about the way water flows. It's always just going to find the opening.
Yep.
So if that weak link is the opening, it's going to flow that way. Now all that force is being directed to where, like, a spot that is weak in the chain, and therefore, like you said, that injury is going to happen.
Yeah.
And then you're in a tough space. But yeah, if you can get to the point where you're strengthening the whole chain, then you're evenly distributing that force across.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we've been talking about patterns a lot, but life is messy. There's times where you slip on the sidewalk, or you step off the curb funny, or you have to like jump out of the way of something. Those moments where, that's it right there. That's the things you can't account for.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
You can, every time you go to pick up something off the ground, you can do a perfect hinge pattern.
Yeah.
But sometimes
you're going to look ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can, but sometimes you got to act without being able to think.
Sure.
And that's where, having those patterns driven deep into your body helps, but then also doing some prep work where you're like trying to bulletproof your ankles, your knees, your hips, your lower back, your shoulders, or you're putting time into doing some of the tissue specific work, that's going to bulletproof your risk for injury in those situations.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's money.
And when you do, again, we've talked about this as well, but ligaments and tendons take longer to recover than muscles, but you can make them stronger and thicker, right? Those are the things that wrap your joints up. So you can improve like the tactile strength, the thickness of your tendons and ligaments, so that, again, it's harder to injure them. It takes time, and you got to do a lot of tissue specific work.
Yeah.
And again, that's best implemented as accessory work after your main patterns.
Yeah. I like it.
Yep.
I do a little bit of that stuff, and mine's probably not as like honed in on like the plan, if you will, because I think I'll throw in like quite a bit of like aesthetic type work as that like accessory stuff sometimes.
Yeah, and that can work for sure.
Yeah, like I'll save that for where I'm just kind of balancing around, like if it's a shoulder lateral raise or a reverse curl or a tricep extension, and or even like core corrective stuff. Like maybe that's where you throw in some sort of like right now in my program, I'm having people do like a high plank kettlebell drag or something like that.
We're
like
doing that too.
Something where you're
anti-rotational.
Yeah, anti-rotational. But I have, like, to some of the stuff you're saying about like having flow and locomotion, and like I've really been trying to like dig deep into how can I create more rotational movements. Like if it's a rotation ball slam, if it's a chop where you're turning and rotating with the band, if it's another one I really like is like a landmine, like a standing landmine rotation. Because I've found, like, in my own training, as I've kind of got back to health, is like my body became so rigid, and I had none of that ability to shift and to move. So I was definitely in the camp that, like, if I wasn't doing a squat and something went wrong, like, I'm in a tough place. So I've been trying to figure out how to like program that in my stuff, and it doesn't have to be everything that you do. Because I think sometimes you can be like, oh man, I don't have any rotation, and then all of a sudden your program becomes like all rotation. Or,
and you're like barely lifting at all. Yeah,
you can get like really like over intense about what you're trying to like prioritize in the program. So yeah, like you said, it's like have your meat and potatoes. That kind of gives you like structure, and then everything else can kind of like be this nice little like seasoning to the dish. So
Absolutely. And, you know, to your point, a couple of things, you were just talking about rotating, that's part of why I like, you know, I love the fundamental 5, but I also like Paul Chek's because he throws twist in there. And you have to train the ability for your pelvis, your hips, your lower body, and your rib cage, your upper body to rotate, to disassociate, meaning pelvis to go one way and the rib cage to go the other way.
Yeah.
You have to train the ability to do that because, again, that relates to walking.
Yes.
Your body has to do that.
Every time you step,
properly.
your hips specifically have a little bit of internal rotation and a little bit of external rotation with every single step. So
and
if you're incredibly rigid and tight, like even walking is going to be uncomfortable. Like,
and you can be trying to take care of your health and have a walking practice and be walking an hour a day, and then for some reason after a month or two of that, your low back or your right hip or you know, something starts to pop up your left knee, like something starts to pop up, it's like aching.
And you're like, why
I've
is
just
that?
been walking. Well, if you're lacking the ability to rotate or range of motion in a certain area, then it's going to pop up over time.
For sure.
Yep. And then the other thing you were talking about is, you know, accessory work being some of that more aesthetic bodybuilding type stuff. And again, like I think that the tissue specific training can come back to that kind of bodybuilding style work in a sense almost, because again, it's like joint specific. So if you're doing a chest fly through a nice controlled full range of motion and you're letting yourself get a good stretch, that's mobility. Yeah. Right? That's training.
It's like RP strengths type of mission is like full range of motion, breaking down those muscle fibers.
Yep.
And typically when I'm programming that, just continuing to use myself as the example, like I'm using like bigger rep schemes. I'm encouraging a little bit of lighter load. It's not meant to be like, hey, I want you to grunt up this, you know, pick the heaviest dumbbells on the shelf and try to like hit me with that bicep curl. It's like, no, I want you to just
swing that shit.
I want you to be able to control it. I want you to be
use
able to
your
get
hips
those
as much as possible.
Yeah, exactly. Make grunting noises when you do it. Like, or I really love like incorporating like TRX, right? You can get that suspension row and get that big stretch behind the head with like a tricep extension or something like that. Like, and you're gonna feel great after that.
Yeah.
Like,
and again, you're doing your like aesthetic, you know, single joint exercises, but if you do them controlled through a full range of motion, you're also training your tissues to be more resilient.
Yep.
So yeah, it's, you know, you can kill multiple birds with one stone.
Yes.
If you're an accurate thrower.
Ooh, nice.
But if you're programming things that overlap, right?
Yeah, and like for those that are programming, like it can become really overwhelming or overcomplicated, like when you start talking about it, but it doesn't have to be like you're saying, like break it down, make it easy for yourself. Like, and it just takes reps of like implementing it.
Yes.
So
push, pull, hinge, squat, carry, or push a sled, or run if you have the ability, and then twist.
With I would love to talk about like where you incorporate like power development.
So power development. So within each of these patterns,
I guess more specifically, because you could do like a heavy squat is developing power in some way, right? You got to like drive up hard out of that. I guess more specifically, like explosive, almost like plyometric-y type stuff.
Yeah. So within each pattern, you have your other variables. You've got your reps, you've got your sets, you've got intensity, you've got tempo, which is going to be a huge factor when training power or whatever you're trying to train. If you're training power, you're going to be training the movement as quickly as possible, right? Whereas if you're training for hypertrophy, you're going to be doing a slow eccentric and you're going to be focusing on controlled reps as much as possible. So I believe that it's very important to make sure that your client or yourself, if you're training yourself, if you're learning these things for yourself, you have to make sure that you are proficient within the patterns before you start to train power.
Yes.
Because explosiveness is, as far as the demand for the nervous system and for the body, it's a much higher demand. So it is important because as people age, it's one of the things that they lose the quickest is their power and their ability to move quickly.
Yeah, and they say if you don't use it, you lose it.
And we're just talking about muscles, folks. And
did not even cross my mind, but I love it. It's so funny.
But yeah, you got to be proficient and comfortable with the pattern before you start trying to escalate the speed that you're executing it with.
For sure. Yeah, you could use not to dog on CrossFit, but use that as the example of if you're trying to do everything that you're doing really fast, really intensely, and really fatiguing, that's where you get kind of that risk to reward conversation. So yeah, it's like if I can do a push-up really, really well, then I can start doing that faster, more explosively.
Yes.
And the whole premise of like training power is to elicit like a really great response. And if I don't even know how to like do half of a push-up, I can't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like to, so when people are moving quickly, it's just a higher risk for injury.
Mm-hmm.
So I will do that with my clients that are ready for it. But when I'm programming for more general population, I like to program power into movements that are more self-limiting. So like training power on a back squat can be inherently more dangerous or risky.
Yeah.
Unless you're doing a box squat and, you're doing a fairly lightweight and just asking people to come up as quick as they can, right? But I like to train power like bike sprints, even heavy sled. Like heavy sled, if even though the sled's not moving fast necessarily, if you're moving the sled as fast as you can with the weight that's on there, you're still training power. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So
yeah, I like regressing stuff. Like obviously that's a dumb statement, but I like taking things like let's take a box jump. Like a box jump is something where like you and I, maybe not so much right now with the old hip, but we could set that thing at 40 inches and get 6 reps of huge explosive jumps. Well,
not me, bro.
This
I'm just kidding.
This individual over here has never done that and is maybe a little bit deconditioned and they can't quite do that. So maybe something where you just set a plate on the floor and have them do single leg taps real quickly, just a quick set of 10, rest it out, fully recover. There's always ways to scale what you're doing, or someone may not be able to do an overhead ball slam, but maybe they can stand and they can take that ball and they can throw it as hard as they can at you. And if you're the trainer, you catch it, hand it back, so that way they're still getting that fast twitch muscle fibery type response, but it's in a manner that is controlled, like you're saying.
Yes.
I would never ask my clients to just do something that's completely out of their capacity.
Single leg box jump.
All right, today we're doing
Yeah.
Funny story about box jumps. I had it was a tandem session, and 2 clients. The one girl could definitely jump higher than the other, and so we were using a 12-inch box. And for the partner, I was adding a 45-pound rubber plate. It's a flat surface and it's not gonna slip off, but it adds maybe 2-3 inches to that jump. So they're taking turns. The one girl goes, the other one's chatting, not paying attention, and she didn't realize the plate's still on there, and she goes to jump on it. And mind you, it's maybe a 16-inch box in total, 15 maybe, and mid jump realizes that the plate's on there and she didn't jump as high, and it was she was falling in slow motion, feet landed on it, but then she's falling backward, and it's so funny, dude. No one got hurt in the process. It wasn't this crazy scary moment, but it was just it was hilarious.
I get terrified sometimes.
Yeah.
I will put box jumps in, and I always use foam blocks, and I have a 6-inch option, or some people I'll literally just have them jump over a jump rope on the floor, but
sure,
watching people, push
as
themselves on
the
box jumps,
trainer,
and
you're
like
just kind of like, pooing your pants a little
Just
bit.
like
Just
waiting for someone to eat shit.
yeah. And I would probably say I have clients that probably could do more than I may be giving them credit for, but it's almost like a safety thing where it's just like you're trying to
risk to reward.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
and even
absolutely.
with not to, again, I tend to go down the rabbit hole, but like with a box jump, you could make the argument that after a certain height anyways, it's really purely just mobility, right? Like, if you're getting past your hip crease,
getting your knees to your chest.
Yeah, it's like
big part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, as far as power development, I mean, again, we're digging into training certain variables within each pattern now, right?
Yep.
So different rep ranges, different tempos. And again, different rep ranges are going to have different specific demands on the body, and they're going to train different aspects. Like we were just saying, doing, sets of 3 to 5 with heavier weight, or sets of 3 to 5 with lighter weight and moving quickly. You're training more strength and power, right? And in that middle range, 5 to 15 reps, you're looking at more glycolytic, hypertrophy type exercise. And then 15 plus is you're more just getting into some cardio or some endurance.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at a quality program, or you're creating a balanced program, or you're trying to execute a balanced program, you're someone who's just going to the gym a few days a week. You maybe train in the 3 to 5 rep range for a few weeks, and then the 5 to 10 rep range for a few weeks, and then the 10 to 15 rep range for a few weeks, and then you kind of cycle through that so that you're getting the stimulus of each different one. And there's ways to make that periodization more complex. But again, as a general population person who's just trying to get as much out of the gym as possible, just rotating through those different demands on a monthly basis, or whatever that is, and getting, again, equal volume with each of the patterns, you're covering
so much ground.
But
you do have to change those rep ranges, because you will find, and I'm sure you've seen this, where you'll have folks that, they could do an incline press with 25-pound dumbbells for 12 reps, but the second you go to 30, they can't get 3.
Yeah,
and
crazy.
That is purely because that individual has, and not in a negative way, but like neglected to train that lower end of the spectrum, where you're lifting a lot of heavy weight, you're asking your body to recruit more to support that weight, and then you're giving your body rest to like recover and then attack that next set with intensity. If you're only training one specific rep range, you're going to kind of get stuck in that like maintenance mode, if you will. So yeah, all that to say, absolutely work on exchanging those like those progressions, if you will, those rep ranges, if you will. But the other thing I'll add is I feel like so many people right now are hung up on the movements constantly needing to change. So you had said something earlier about like perfecting the movement. I think more and more people need to understand the concept of strength training and exercise is all about practice. If you're not good at it, you are not going to elicit like a great stimulus from it. And, there's a whole list of things that can happen because of that. But, and even I'll go on even more of a tangent, is so many people are afraid of the gym setting because they're not good at it. So give yourself grace in that, because the reality is you have to be good at it to get the results that you're looking for. So don't be so eager to like switch up and change up all the movements for some cool new fancy program. Just focus on getting good at the basics so that you can progress and actually see the success you're having from week to week and month to month, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Doing a movement, doing an exercise, you don't just get to do it. Like it's like saying like, oh, play this song on the guitar. Like
imagine traveling to a foreign language and just thinking you could pick up where these people have been speaking this language for decades.
Yeah, you can't just be like, oh, I'm gonna do single leg RDLs because it's a hamstring movement or it's a hinge movement. That movement could take you months, if not longer, to do effectively enough to get a good stimulus from it.
True.
Right? And And it's great to train that pattern and learn how to do that, because then you're improving your ability to not only learn things physically, but mentally, and also you're teaching your body new patterns and how to coordinate those things. But you're not going to get a great stimulus from a single leg RDL the first 5 times you do it, because you're just trying to figure it out.
Yep.
So if you do that for a month, and then you switch up the movement, like you're taking away from the stimulus and the results you could get from your workout, because you're spending more time and energy trying to learn another new movement.
Yes.
So
yeah, and even further, if you're someone who doesn't feel confident in the gym, but you're constantly changing things up on yourself, then you're not helping your situation.
Yeah, making it harder. You're spending more time and energy learning new movements.
Totally.
It's like, stick to the basics.
Yes.
Again, fundamental 5 basic movement patterns. Sometimes bilateral, meaning on 2 legs or with both arms, and sometimes unilateral, meaning on 1 leg or using 1 arm at a time. And focus on the fundamentals. Like, you should be competent with a bench press, a dumbbell chest press, a dumbbell overhead press, a dumbbell row, a pull-up, a squat, a deadlift, a lunge. You should be competent with those fundamental movements. And that could take you years.
Yes.
So get to work. You know what I mean?
Those are all the same patterns. So it's not like you have to get stuck to like going to the gym for a year and doing the same 6 lifts every single time.
Yeah.
But like we're more saying like do those patterns consistently over and over and over. Well, like with my programs, like I'll typically make them last like 4 to 5 weeks. Like I think that's enough time, as long as we know the patterns.
Yeah.
And then we can kind of change stuff within the branch of that pattern. It's enough time to where like, okay, I'm like competent in kind of the movement. And by like week 2, 3, 4 and on, now I can really start like pushing what I'm doing. But like my first phase when people sign up for my program intentionally is like 7 weeks long, because I don't know where these people are at on the spectrum of fitness. I don't know what they've come from, what they know. And I want people to like just get comfortable in the gym and get comfortable with these very basic movements. That I think the first phase is like your trap bar deadlift, a back squat, a bench press, an overhead press. It's all like the stuff we're talking about. And it's like, sorry, like you're on week 6 and you're going to go to the gym and do the same thing. But I've gotten so many like asks of like, when is this going to change? It's like, well, hang in there. And not to be a dick, but just saying like, I want you to get really good at this. And I want you to be able to like see that you're getting good at it and then know when to push.
Yes.
Like that's a big part of getting better.
Yeah, absolutely. And not that you can't rotate movements every 4 weeks. It's just, especially if you're new, or especially if your time is limited, focus on the things that are going to move the needle the most.
Yes.
Don't get caught up trying to do XYZ program. And another big issue is people change their program too often. They don't even finish the program. They say they have an 8-week program in front of them and they get 3 weeks into it and they're like, I want to mix it up.
For sure.
Yeah.
It's like the same person that's asking, oh, when is this going to change up? Didn't hit the last 3 workouts.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Yeah. Like, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like it just
got boring to you.
It doesn't need to be entertaining. It's a practice.
Yes.
It's work.
Yep.
You got to show up and you got to do it. You have to be intentional and you have to try and get better at the basics. And the best people still do that, I
really like analogies, and I was just thinking as we were talking about this, there's a reason why In-N-Out is very good at what they do.
Hell yeah. Love
You know
this.
what I mean? And you can say whatever you want about their fries, whatever. Get them extra crispy and put some fucking I said it. Put some fucking salt on them.
I like them.
And drop the hard F-bomb. But
I like their fries.
I do too. But I'll say this. There's a reason that they're really good at what they do is because they have a very simplistic menu and they are able to replicate that over and over and over. And there's a line out the freaking door every single night at that place. So as the example, the basics work and they work well, and you just got to trust the process.
Absolutely. And then sprinkle in different stuff in the accessory work. But the meat and potatoes needs to be the patterns, right? And Nothing too fancy. Yeah, and there's to your point here, there's a book called Ultimate Athleticism, and it's a book, and I'm blanking on the author's name, Max something. Maybe it'll come to me. He wrote a whole book on the carryover of these 4 movements, and these are the only 4 movements he trained. He got really strong at for a long time, and the carryover is massive. So he talks about, if you were limited to 4 movements, that's all you could do, that's all you could train, these would be the ones that have the biggest carryover to everything else. Airborne lunge, which is a lunge where you stand on one leg and you like lower your knee to the ground, but you don't, it's like a lunge, but you don't push off your back foot, you just tap your knee. So it's a single leg squat pattern.
Yep.
A front lever, which is basically an advanced pull-up. It's a gymnastics movement. It's like a straight arm. Like, yeah, it's almost like a straight arm pull-up where you like go from a hang and you lift your whole body so that it's parallel with the floor, but your arms stay straight. It's like a super advanced pull-up, basically.
Interesting.
And then bottoms up kettlebell press. So kettlebell upside down, pressing overhead for pressing and stability of the shoulder. And then heavy kettlebell swing. It's like a deadlift, heavy hinge. Yeah. So you could spend years getting proficient and strong.
Squat, hinge, push, pull.
Yep. At those 4 movements.
Yeah.
And that would carry over to so many things in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's money. I wonder how you came up with like those specifically though.
Probably took time.
Yeah. I mean, he did the due diligence to see like what worked and
yeah.
Yep. Because that calisthenic pull-up type is like very specific.
Yeah.
Like a pretty niche movement, but
it is. But he teaches progressions for learning how to do it, but it's not just the movement, but it's getting through the progressions so you're strong enough to do it.
Yeah.
Which requires pull-up strength.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it, folks. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. You got anything else? Anything else you want to throw out there?
No, I feel like, this was even helpful for me because again, you've done this for so many years, so it's helpful to listen to someone who's kind of like seen all that you've seen and been able to play with all you've been able to within your programming to improve even what I do. So
yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Well, I'm still learning too, so